skirmishers will die slower if they're in forests. In fact, this applies to every unit in the game except for cavalry, which receives debuffs instead. This also applies to cities, which have the exact same stats as forests, just a lot stronger. Interestingly, forests provide 90% more artillery defense than cities do. So you kinda have to choose between defense and offense. Mud makes everything slower, roads make everything faster, shallow waters give the worst imaginable debuffs possible to everything, and you can't pass through cliffs and deep waters. Alright, that's gonna be it for this video. Now you know everything about terrain in Lines of Battle, and you know what each terrain does. See you next time, bye. Oh what, you thought I was just gonna give you some numbers and go on with the rest of my day? Hell no, we got work to do. But which work exactly? I already gave you the numbers. I already told you what happens to which unit in which terrain. So, is there anything left? Well, terrain in Lines of Battle is only 10% memory. The other 90% is game sense. Let's have a game analysis, shall we? By turn 5, both sides know everything about each other's army. Lancers are the cavalry unit with the most amount of charge penetration. That is, how much of the enemy's charge resistance they can decrease. Though they have the least amount of melee damage across the entire cavalry section, so don't expect them to win in a fight if they couldn't deal charge damage. That being said, Red has the very obvious cavalry advantage, as he has triple the amount of cavalry that Blue has. Though Blue has the advantage over Red everywhere else. Red has a free 6-pounder artillery, while Blue has one 12-pounder along with two 6-inch howitzers. You can check the infantry yourself. Early game, Blue made the stupid decision of sending the only 2 cavalry units he had at Red's left flank, which they obviously lost, which made Red the complete cavalry hegemon in the battle. Right now, Red should play offensively, using his cavalry to weaken enemy units in order to make ground for a future assault that he can launch. At the same time, Blue should play defensively and try to keep his position against any enemy attacks. Red decides to push on Blue's left flank. Now, contrary to popular belief, having the high ground doesn't necessarily give any combat modifiers, but it does make artillery fire over friendly units. And look at what we have here. The 2 of Blue's howitzers, arguably his most dangerous assets, are of higher elevation than his infantry. To make this even worse for Red, all of Red's artillery pieces are behind this forest over here. And if you didn't know, forests absorb all firepower regardless of where it's coming from. Red's artillery is useless. Red did send one of his lancers to get Blue's 2 howitzers, which it succeeded in doing so, but it was too late. Eventually Red's left flank collapsed and the battle resulted in a Blue victory. This comes to show how important terrain and artillery placement according to terrain is in the game. Next game, Blue has 7 grenadiers, 4 cuirassiers, and 4 lancers, the definition of quality over quantity. Blue positioned his entire army on the left side of the map along this road, except for this one militia unit which is on the right side of the map, which is probably there for scouting purposes because he's going to be fighting on the left side, but the militia is there to make sure Red isn't hiding anything in these forests over here. As both sides begin making their way to the area surrounding this victory point, it becomes evident that Blue has the upper hand here, because there's nothing much you can do against 7 grenadiers. And hey, is that a lancer engaging in melee without charging? Anyways, let's see what's going on the other side of the map. Yeah, good thing Blue sent a militia there. But will Blue use this knowledge to his advantage? Stay tuned to find out. No. He doesn't use this at all. He just ignores the cavalry and keeps on fighting the infantry, which is the exact reason why he goes on to lose the battle. I'm not kidding when I say this, but Blue lost to Red despite having the infantry and cavalry advantage, which wasn't used correctly now that I think about it. Blue could have easily prevented this by taking a bunch of spare infantry and using them to form a defensive line over here. And this works because in front of this line is just trees and buildings, which, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, they give cavalry defense debuffs. Combine that with the fact that the cavalry needs to charge headfirst into the fronts of the grenadier brigades, and you have a recipe for disaster. I'm not gonna cover a third game. I'm just tired, man. Let's just get this over with. Always think ahead of time in Lines of Battle. Any terrain that you can use, any terrain that your opponent can use, any terrain that anyone can use, show no mercy. Scan the entire battlefield and leave no crumbs behind. Once you're done, think of where you should go. Think of how you should get there. Then think of where and how your opponents are going to go. And then build the general backbone of your entire strategy based off of that information. After all of that, actually deploy your army. Also, don't forget some skirmishers that you're going to be using for intel gathering that you will use later on. Once you have more intel about your opponent's army, begin adding things to your strategy. Any weaknesses that you can exploit, any strong areas you should avoid, and once you're done with all that, the only thing you need to do to master terrain is practice. Thanks for watching, bye.